the things I think about, and one of the reasons why I'm on the show, is because of the comments that were made, frankly, on this show, that the only way for a young African-American kid to be successful in this country is to be the exception and not the rule. That is a dangerous, offensive, disgusting message to send to our young people today, that the only way to succeed, black man who thinks for himself, you can be anything in America if you're black, except for a conservative. That's why Sunny is so radical and so disgusting with her comments.
Hostin's obsession with race gets thrown back in her face. Today's video comes to us from Sunny Hostin. Sounds like a town. We're in Sunny Hostin.
One of the most distinctive aspects of Sunny Hostin's tenure on The View has been her openness in addressing significant societal issues.
For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice,
particularly institutionalized racism and injustice in America. Her recent debate with Senator Tim Scott showed how deeply held racial attitudes may spark contentious debates, especially when personal experiences clash with broader perspectives on systemic issues.
By the way, I thought liberals were so open-minded. Why are they so obsessed with, why are these women at The View so obsessed with you?
Hostin's understanding of the systemic barriers that affect many aspects of American life forms the basis of her discussion on racial disparities on The View. Throughout the conversation, she identified 5 key areas where these differences are most noticeable.
Wow. I'm a little bit in shock. I just always thought of myself as Puerto Rican, half Puerto Rican.
If this content is interesting to you and you would like to see more insights like this, please click the subscribe button to help us reach a larger audience. Thank you for your support. Now, let's dive back in.
Didn't think I was, my family was originally from Spain and slaveholders.
Yeah. So how are you feeling, my friend?
I think it's actually pretty interesting that my husband and I have shared roots.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that. And I think it's great for our children to know this information.
Hostin argued that in order to address economic inequality, systemic racism must be recognized. She brought attention to the financial gap between African American and white families and linked it to historical injustices, including slavery, segregation, and discriminatory lending practices.
So here's what I'm going to suggest. I'm going to suggest the fact of the matter is that progress in America is palpable. It can be measured in generations. I look back at the fact that my grandfather, born in 1921 in Sally, South Carolina, when he was on a sidewalk, a white person was coming, he had to step off and not make eye contact. That man believed then, with some doubt now, in the goodness of America, because he believed that having faith in God, faith in himself, and faith in what the future could hold for his kids would unleash opportunities in ways that you cannot imagine.
The focus of Hostin's critique was education. According to her, schools in predominantly Black and Latino communities receive less funding and fewer resources, illustrating how often minority populations are let down by the public education system. Hostin stated that this disparity limits opportunities for upward mobility and perpetuates the cycle of poverty.
Well, listen, HBCUs is a good one, because one of the reasons why I took the funding for HBCUs to the highest level in the history of the country, and then I helped make it permanent, is because I believe that education is the closest thing to magic in America. So I'm about making sure that our kids have as many opportunities to succeed as possible. It's one of the reasons why.
Hostin highlighted how minority groups have limited access to healthcare and are disproportionately impacted by chronic illnesses. She stressed that these disparities are not accidental, but rather the result of structural inequalities in the healthcare system. Another significant element of Hostin's argument was the disproportionate representation of African Americans in the criminal justice system.
10% of African Americans got a high school diploma. Today, it's over 90%. When you look at the income, success that we've had.
That's an HBCU stat.
She emphasized that persistent bias in law enforcement, sentencing, and incarceration perpetuates racial inequality and impedes the progress of affected communities. Hostin also discussed how discriminatory housing laws have traditionally affected African American families.
Vice President, we've had 2 African Americans to be secretaries of the state. In my home city, the police chief is an African American who's now running for mayor. The head of the Highway Patrol for South Carolina is an African American.
Still
in
exceptions.
In 1975.
She shed light on redlining and other practices that prevented Black families from owning homes and building generational wealth. Throughout the conversation, one of the primary topics of dispute was the idea of individual success. Hostin acknowledged that Tim Scott's accomplishments are exceptional.
African American and Hispanic hosts. So what I'm suggesting is that the yesterday's exception is today's rule.
However, she argued that they do not prove the absence of structural barriers. She added that portraying such success stories as the norm rather than the exception undermines efforts to eradicate systemic inequalities. Hostin disagreed with Scott's assertion that his achievement proved systemic racism is not a widespread issue. According to her, highlighting extraordinary success stories hides the daily struggles people face due to systemic problems. She claimed that this type of thinking may lead to complacency, as people might believe that larger issues can be addressed without systemic change.
I can't imagine.
But it is.
But it's not actually. Here's
It's been
here's the-
114 years.
Yeah, so the fact of the matter is we've had an African-American president, African-American vice president. We've had 2 African-Americans to be secretaries of the state. In my home city, the police chief is an African-American who's now running for mayor.
In addition to racism and inequality, Hostin spoke about the debate's dynamics, audience reactions, and editorial control, which she said were designed to suppress productive discourse.
Yesterday's exception is today's rule. And for us to
So
suggest...
America has met its promise.
No, of course, the concept of America is that we are going to become a more perfect union. That in fact, the challenges that we face 50 years ago and 60 years ago should not be the same challenges that we face today. And here's the way that you measure that.
While co-hosting The View, Hostin has consistently pushed for equality and justice. She regarded this discussion as an opportunity to challenge narratives that, in her view, downplay structural barriers. However, the combative tone of the discussion highlighted how difficult it is to foster fruitful dialogue in a polarized media environment.
Now, the media mob, once again, they're coming for one of their favorite targets as 2024 Republican presidential candidate, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. And as per usual, the ladies at that hard-hitting news show on ABC called The View couldn't help from, well, weighing in, this time worrying over his love life.
Hostin argued that systemic racism is ingrained in all facets of American legislation, especially in areas related to taxes and voting rights. She emphasized the need for structural change to address these widespread inequalities and advocated for policies prioritizing fairness and inclusivity. Hostin criticized Scott's position as overly simplistic.
She's actually the descendant of slave owners from Europe. Here's how she took the news. Roll it.
Wow. I'm a little bit in shock. I just always thought of myself as Puerto Rican, half Puerto Rican. I didn't think I was, my family was originally from Spain and slaveholders.
Yeah.
Asserting that his focus on individual stories failed to address the broader structural issues. She encouraged him to acknowledge the systemic barriers preventing many minorities from achieving the same level of success.
Ginny Thomas, who's white, and he might marry a Ginny Thomas. Is that not playing the race card?
Absolutely, Sean. The Democrat Party and the progressive left, they are stuck in Jim Crow 1920s and 30s. What they do not want is a black man who thinks for himself. You can be anything in America if you're black, except for a conservative.
The highly emotional nature of the argument highlighted how deeply personal these topics are. Hostin's passion for advocating structural change and Scott's emphasis on individual empowerment resulted in a discussion that was both captivating and polarizing. Hostin placed the conversation in the broader historical context of racial inequality in the U.S. She argued that slavery, segregation, and discriminatory legislation are the root causes of the structural barriers that persist today.
That's why Sunny is so radical and so disgusting with her comments. They do not want my life story to be told because it disrupts the lies of the radical left. I can't think of anything more disgusting and more disheartening to watch the Democratic Party descend down into the 1920s.
Despite the URA's heated debate, Hostin emphasized the importance of bridging divides to address these urgent issues. She encouraged open conversations and collaboration to uncover meaningful solutions.
The only thing that I worry about is like a Ginny Thomas popping up, right? So you have someone that is single and someone becomes president and then he meets a Ginny Thomas. And so if someone is not married and then they get married to Ginny Thomas, I'm concerned.
Sunny Hostin's conversation with Tim Scott on The View brought to light the ongoing struggle to balance the broader realities of structural inequality with individual success stories.
I think that women, white women in particular, want to protect this patriarchy here because it's to their benefit. Yeah. They want to make sure that their husbands do well. They want to make sure that their sons do well. They want to make sure that their children do well. And they want to make sure that they do well. Most of the women in some of these studies are married white women.
Kid today can just change the stations and see how much progress has been made in this country. ABC, NBC, CBS, ESPN, CNN, Fox News all have African American and Hispanic hosts.
Despite their differing opinions, the discussion demonstrated the importance of continued dialogue and effort to eliminate the systemic barriers affecting the American experience, to ensure you don't miss any more videos. So, what do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you don't want to miss out on the hottest celebrity news, make sure to subscribe to Daily Finder.